Minas Tirith, the White City, the Tower of God, one of the largest structures ever conceived by Tolkien, and over a year and a half ago, I began work on the largest Lord of the Rings diorama I have ever built. A true-scale, stupidly massive wargaming bigature of this mighty fortification of Gondor. When complete, this full board will be over 20 meters wide and who knows how high. This certainly isn't your normal gaming table, and such a stupidly massive endeavor is not something I could complete alone. Today I am proud to present a long-awaited update on the Minas Tirith COVID-19 community build. 18 months ago, I put out the call to summon hobbyists and crafters around my local community and across the world to come together in the face of hobby isolation and help build this massive project. I released a full suite of tutorials and templates, and folks from all corners of our hobby community have been painting armies, building houses, towers, walls, bastions, siege towers, and posting them down to me here in Australia. Later this month, we have an absolutely massive reveal as I am joined by a whole host of fellow YouTubers to complete the first suburb inside the city walls, and today we begin that journey by building the foundation of that structure, including 2 massive ring walls scaling a mighty mountainside, and finally, the long-requested gates of Minas Tirith, although maybe not the gates you're expecting. So far, we have nearly 5 meters of wall completed between what I have here in the studio and around the Queensland community, as well as a whole host of loose buildings and structures, including stairwells to connect our 1-foot-high fortifications to the city below, towering siege towers for assaulting the white walls of Gondor, and a nice spread of houses, stables, and generic Gondorian architecture. But we have no gaming board. Every piece here is a freestanding item and doesn't feel like a truly immersive landscape. That all changes today. I sat down and pored over my huge collection of references and artwork, digital models, and of course the films themselves, and decided which portion of the city would suit for the suburb of Tubertown, and I immediately fell in love with a key piece of artwork by, as always, Alan Lee. This is the Lamplight Street, a winding procession that passes up from the front gate to the Gatehouse set into the second level of the city, and is lined with fascinating buildings from the craftspeople of Gondor. Wheelwrights, merchants, workshops, blacksmiths, and metalworks, of course the lamplights themselves, and even the famous rat catcher's shop.
The detail in Minas Tirith was wonderful, and my personal favourite was this little shop, like a little store, and it was the rat catcher's place.
The rat catchers, that's right. But I mean, you know, it's not as odd as it sounds.
There would have been a rat catcher, I guess. You know, a place like Minas Tirith would have been riddled with the things.
These are the rat catcher's cottage up there at the foot of the wall.
This is clearly the perfect place to assemble a host of amazing creations from my fellow YouTubers. Oh, and by the way, you'll get a little sneak peek of which YouTubers are joining us in just a moment, so stay tuned. Of course, this location also happens to be one of the most complicated parts of the city interior, featuring a sloping and terraced street layout that is wedged between the union of the massive gatehouse of the second level inner ring wall and a large portion of the outer wall and bastions, all nestled into a foundation of the mountain itself that thrusts forth from beneath Mount Mindoluin. At least I'll know if I can make this work at 28mm scale, I should have no trouble with the rest of the city. Up first, as always, was to design the layout. I spent a fair bit of time umming and ahhing over the size of the board and ended up deciding that a 5x3 board with the walls running across the length would give me enough room to have the inner and outer walls, the city in between, and then the Pelennor and some of the outer second level on the other side. Today we won't be actually starting from the ground up. Before I jump into making the baseboard, I'm going to make the ring walls, and for the first time in this entire build, I'm going to attempt to make them actually curved. Now, getting the curvature to be screen accurate posed quite a unique problem, but there is absolutely one golden resource for this build that has been invaluable all through the design process. The original Minas Tirith bigature made by the miniatures department on The Lord of the Rings was actually made at 1/72nd scale, which is extremely close to the original scale of 25mm of the Middle-earth miniature range by Games Workshop.
Minas Tirith is Tolkien's greatest architectural invention. That's absolutely gigantic. In the real world, it would have been almost a third of a mile high, 1,700 feet. Minas Tirith in its entirety was built at 1/72nd scale. The complete set of Minas Tirith was 7 meters tall and 6.5 meters in diameter. It's an enormous structure.
All hail Alex Funky, lord of bigature cinematography. So if we know the diameter of the circle, we can work out the radius and the angles between two tangents at fixed points on the curve. But instead of busting out that half-finished maths degree, I opted to instead use my half-finished engineering degree and just made up some functional templates with MDF panels, a length of rope, and a clothesline. I made separate templates for the first and second ring wall, as obviously they are different size circles, but hilariously, even with all my fancy measuring over such a small distance as 3 feet in circumference, they weren't really that different, but we don't do things by halves around here. Next, I secured the templates to sheets of 50mm thick extruded polystyrene using double-sided tape and ran the entire shape through the hot wire cutter. The wire only cuts foam, so as long as you're slow and steady and keep the wire straight, you'll get a nice true curved cut. 6 cuts later and we have the outer ring wall. Before doing the inner wall, I decided to start with the gatehouse so I could get my bearings on the size of the various components. I cut up a bunch of rectangles for the towers and then began work on the gate itself, which is an incredibly interesting pattern of curved archways. I matched the pattern of the various elements by drawing a copy using 2 of the largest food groups in the Australian diet, and then ever so carefully cut that out with my hot wire cutter. A really low temp and low speed will help you stay accurate and keep the wire straight. A little bit of sandpaper to smooth out the wobble marks from the cutting and she's good. This piece actually has some interesting layered arches, so I cut out the second arch shape for the outer layer and trimmed it down to a thin sheet and affixed it to the front and the back and through the center. Now we've got the core of that cool archway detailing. I whipped up another slightly taller than normal bastion as per the guide linked up above and started mocking up the small section of wall to run between the new gatehouse and that bastion, and I have to admit guys, I cheated here. This section of wall isn't actually going to be curved. It's only very short, so you'll never be able to tell anyway, and by keeping it straight, I can give it an amazing chamfer down to the ground so it gets wider as you go down to the base. I had to assemble this in pieces because of the height of my hot wire cutter, but once it was all glued down, I have a really sweet looking wall. It's a pretty subtle effect, but it just looks so much more awesome and accentuates the whole sloping inwards nature of Minas Tirith. When we come to do large sections of the second level ring wall, I'm not sure how I'm going to curve and chamfer this wall, but that's future Lockie's problem. So with all of my parts roughly enough mocked up, now we can play with the positioning, and the first thing that you'll notice is this thing is huge. The floor height of the second gate is almost taller than the outer battlement. I'm going to have a really interesting time sloping the ground down to the front gate throughout the city. Now, every piece of footage you've seen so far was actually filmed about 3 months ago. In fact, this collab was supposed to come out 6 months ago, but more and more YouTubers just kept joining the project, and then I had a baby, and somehow it's nearly the end of 2021. And after building the massive Dol Guldur build for Halloween, having one large 5x3 foot gaming board doesn't seem so manageable. And to further complicate matters, the normal place I get my timber sheeting is currently locked behind a state border. But I do have some pre-cut sheets I could use from the Osgiliath project. The only trouble is, they're even bigger. So I've decided to go for 2 boards, a 3x4 and a 2x4, which will make the full board an extra 5 square feet of surface area with 5x4 instead of 5x3, but in 2 smaller manageable portions. I decided to use the larger half for the front and the smaller half for the back, and I've had a small stroke of genius. By using multiple boards, the rear board can be built much smaller in terms of depth and simply sit atop a timber plinth to elevate it to the required height. So I decided to build the walls of the second level first and then build my way down into the city. The obvious starting place is to finish this gatehouse in its entirety. This piece is fully freestanding, so I don't need to worry about any obscure details, and it's a great chance to really set the bar for the style of ornate fortified stonework. Starting with the gate arch, I created a pattern of curved stonework detailing, following my reference as closely as possible, first drawing it on before making any cuts and using using various curved objects to get the right style of arch. Once I was happy with the look, I cut in the pattern of the stonework with my scalpel nice and slowly on those tricky curves, and then gave them my usual stonework treatment. As always, to see this process in detail, see the tutorial linked above, but it basically consists of using the flat end of my scalpel to depress random bricks to create a sense of relief between the stones, widening the grout lines with a pencil, and creating a textured surface with crumpled aluminium foil. With both sides done, I moved on to the tower foundations and cut a single window as we see on the gatehouse. This was given some small edge detailing, and then I depressed the core section as deep as I could. I'm not going to actually make this portion of the tower hollow, so that will give us enough of the impression of the window. Then for the stonework. The towers actually have a really interesting pattern using bricks of different sizes. I approximated this as best I could whilst taking advantage of the lines between my foam layers and getting a nice mix of my normal brick size with some small and quite large pieces as well. It just looks so interesting, so much more than the normal uniform block size, and this is really great for a detailed piece like the gatehouse that is going to get a lot of attention. With the pattern established, I had to wrap it all the way around the four sides of the tower, although in places where I knew it would be joined to another structure, I left it flat for a good solid connection. 2 towers later, and it's time to attach our 3 pieces together. As always, physical bonding and adhesive is key, so a whole bunch of fast bond PVA and little skewers is the way. Up next, I grabbed my hot wire cutter and sliced up another 2 layers of stone for each tower, and then cut a little chamfer and cutaway corner on each side to match the top of the gatehouse profile. This simple form change really breaks up the blocky elements and starts to hint at that exciting stonework to come. Just like the lower portions of the tower, I created an interesting brickwork pattern on the exterior with some different sized blocks, and now it's time to get really clever. These sections are going to be fully interiored, but instead of building the top of this gatehouse as little walls that get glued together for strength, I've carved them as solid blocks that I'm going to hollow. So I hacked a really ugly hole through the center and then grabbed my proxen and threaded the wire through the hole before mounting it. Then slowly and carefully using my shifting lens brace, I was able to make a series of pretty wonderful cuts to remove the material and create an inner wall face. I was initially going to carve little face plates that I would then glue to that surface, but it works so well with the proxen that I just decided to carve straight onto the interior wall, allowing me to keep even more playable area inside the towers. Of course, all this playable area needs to be accessed, so it's time for a few doorways, some classic Gondorian archways just on the inside walls for now. I'll do the exterior ones when we line up the walls outside. I created the curve with one of the new 50mm Zorpazorp resin bases, a sexy sneak peek of the new Ruined City range coming out in the next few weeks, and then added some arch detailing and punched out those super spicy murder holes as well. A quick floor tile pattern in the guardhouses, and then some PVA and skewers will stick down our tower toppers nice and firmly. For the causeway above the gate arch, I made some angled battlements following the reference closely and glued down an elevated floor plate and some stairs through the doors so the colonnade that I'll make up in a sec can be manned by the defenders. So all the structural components are done, now it's time to start adding some details. We've got to do the roofs and the battlements for the very top of the towers. There's a colonnaded archway section through the center above the gate, some extra detailing on the gate itself, and then some stairs and extra pieces to make it super playable and begin to interface this structure with the rest of the walls. But up first, of course, is the iconic roof. Another sheet of foam for our flooring with a bit of brickwork texture, and then it's on to our battlements. And today we're doing something different and carving these not with knife, but with the hot wire cutter, using this amazing MDF template that one of my Patreons and huge supporter of the Minas Tirith project, Albert Fraval, sent me. You guys might remember that Albie also made all our building templates that are available on Zorpazorp.com for free. He just doesn't stop being awesome. Thanks, Albie. The templates make the complex shape really easy, and then after some sexy detailing matching the reference, we've got some baller battlements, and then it's time to crack on with the archway colonnade above the gate. After firing an an ultramarine on 32mm base and a Kiwi 50-cent piece, the Aussie 20 center took the prize for perfect curve, and after a bit of basic carving, we've got some nice archways, which I glued in place and held firm with some skewers. The pillars are just some dowel rod and foam, but to make sure they were strong, I actually pinned them by drilling it out with a pin vise and inserting a skewer into either end through the top and bottom, and then this whole colonnade piece is super robust. The final elements are some foam accents down the causeway battlements and some Hearst Arts cast details from my bits box to jazz up the main gate archway, and then for now, she is finished, and somehow this piece took me nearly a week to craft. I still need to finish all the walls for this second ring wall, the outer ring wall, and then the landforming before I can even start to work on the city itself. Boy, oh boy, do I need some help. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to light the beacons of Zorpazorp. This seems pretty safe.
Oh, it's kindled.
Oh my god. The beacons in Minas Tirith! The beacons are lit! Zorpazorp calls for aid.
And you too will answer.
Yeah.
Hasta the YouTubers! Yes!
The Horn of Zorpazorp.
Can you hear that?
What the fuck are you on about?
Lucky!
9 companions. You shall be the Fellowship of the Zorp.
Could have rung a taxi.
Who's a good boy?
Why is it I'm always the f***ing pony?